Hello YouTube, Jonathan here, and today I wanted to take a look at the United States of America in Axis and Allies Revised. Now, the United States is the last country to go. It's fifth out of five, and it has the advantage of being equally equipped to focus against Germany in the Atlantic or against Japan in the Pacific. There are three major strategy lines for the United States. All out against Germany, all out against Japan, or trying to split your forces between the two fairly evenly. Now, I have found that the U.S. tends to be more effective when it leans more to one side or the other, especially when it leans more towards Germany. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean completely ignoring Japan. You don't want to do that, but I do recommend focusing heavily on Germany. I have a friend who insists that the best strategy for America is simply to build fighters every turn, fly them to England, fly them to the Soviet Union for defense. Now, to be fair, I have never tried this strategy, but aside from being incredibly boring for the American player, over the long run, I don't think this would be any more effective in fact, I think it'd be a little less effective than taking a more direct, engaging strategy. Because yes, you may fortify the Russian defense, but typically the American Navy helps the British until the British are strong enough to stand on their own. So if they're not getting involved, it could slow that down. Then the Americans help take North Africa and threaten the southern coast of Germany, while the British threaten the north. Now, under this airplane-only strategy, Germany is not threatened from the south, leaves them more able to devote units to fortify up north and to fight against Russia, makes it easier for them to move in more troops into North Africa. I don't particularly like that strategy. I don't think that airplanes only is the worst thing you could possibly do, but it just seems like an incredibly boring approach, and I think there are better things for America to do. Now, typically, because I like to focus on Germany primarily, I will move my fleet down here, move this destroyer over, up here, so it joins in the action as quickly as possible, have the British join me, build a little bit more surface fleet and more transports, and for the first maybe 2 or 3 turns, keep building up the surface fleet here and just shuffling transports back and forth. Once the fleet is strong enough to stand on its own, maybe move it a little bit further, and there are enough surface fleet ships or surface ships that you may be able to defend 2 territories. Maybe Germany has lost some fighters against Russia or against England. You might start to move a fleet in here with your main surface fleet with a smaller surface fleet over here on the cusp, and then you'll have a longer transport chain going in like that. Now, if you decide to go after Japan, then I recommend going very heavily after them. Still assist England with your initial naval movement in North Africa, but aside from that, focus over here. Now, if Japan did not attack your fleet at Pearl Harbor, you should consolidate your navy. That can either mean here, or potentially here, depending on where their navy is. If they have a sizable force within striking distance of the Solomon Islands, you might not want to go after there on your first turn. But if they don't, that can be a good initial staging ground. It isn't worth anything, that much is true, but let me count my spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But your bomber that you start with on eastern United States can head over to the Pacific, and if you land it in Solomon, that gives you decent range to attack with your bomber and the rest of your navy if you do want to press on. So the Solomons can be a strategic location from that perspective. You can buy 2 carriers on your turn, and you can put them both over here off the west coast, which will instantly give you a navy with some massive defensive power, especially if the Japanese did not attack Pearl Harbor. You'll now have 3 carriers, and you have 4 fighters. The 2 here, and then the 1 here, and then 1 in eastern United States. If they did take out this carrier, you'll have 2 carriers over here, and 3 fighters. Again, these 2, and then the 1 on the island of Hawaii, which is still a very potent defense. And then you have your destroyer down here, which could go up in this direction. So very quickly, if you're focusing heavily against Japan, you can build a very strong fleet. So that might be something that you would do. One move that I've tried a few times, and I have found it not to be especially successful, certainly not as successful as I initially had hoped, was to build those 2 carriers, but put 1 over here and 1 off the coast of eastern United States. That does split your forces, and it does give you a little bit more strength on either side, but it doesn't give you the kind of quick boost that you'll need if you want to be a major threat to Japan by probably turn 3. And it doesn't really speed up your building on the East Coast a whole lot. I mean, it does give you a little bit more surface fleet, but it's still going to take you the second turn to move it down here. You won't have any more transports built to shovel guys across, so you won't be able to build those till your second turn. So you're still at least 3 turns away from having a handful of transports over here and some forces with which to cause damage to Germany. So I think you're much better off focusing more heavily over here, or if you want to, focusing heavily against Japan. Which option is better is going to be up to you. You're going to want to think about your opponents. Do you think Japan's going to be overly aggressive? Do you think Germany's going to be overly aggressive? Is Germany known for turtling, being very good at building lots of defense and being very difficult to whittle down? That is often the case for players who aren't new, who like to play as Germany. Typically, the Allies all focus on them more often than not, and they get very good at that sort of thing. So those are just things that you'll want to keep in mind as the United States. You want to absolutely make sure if you're focusing against Germany, you coordinate with England. You don't really have to coordinate with anybody over against Japan, but you need to be confident that the Soviet Union and England can keep Germany at bay. It's also helpful if you believe that if the Japanese player sees you building up, they'll be less likely to move into Russia. If that is the case, then going after Japan can be a much better option if it distracts them from their what should be their goal, taking out the Soviet Union with Germany as quickly as possible. So those are just some strategies that I would keep in mind when playing the United States. And then just some moves that I prefer to make. I hope you enjoyed this video. If I'm doing a good job, let me know with a thumbs up or in the comment section if there's anything that you'd like me to consider, things you think that I've missed in this game of Axis and Allies, other things you'd like to see in these strategy videos. Please leave a comment there down below, and I will see what I can do to integrate those thoughts into future videos, and I hope you enjoyed this one.